Welcome to the Heartbeat Podcast with your host, Mike Sommer, where CIOs get what they won't hear anywhere else. Candid insights, real strategies, and the truth about leading tech in a world that's changing faster than ever.
Our guest today is David Williamson, a seasoned C-level technology executive with deep roots in life science sector. David has led all aspects of IT across multiple organizations, architecting enterprise-wide strategies and delivering scalable systems that fuel business growth. At the intersection of technology and business, David has engineered transformations that cut costs up to 30% and boosted productivity by 20%. He's a builder of high-performance teams, a catalyst for innovation, and a leader who thrives on operational excellence. His strategy mindset has driven both cultural and technological change, turning IT into a growth engine. David also serves on the board of advisors at Quadris, a disruptive startup revolution life science manufacturing, where his ability to align cutting-edge technology with real-world use cases delivers breakthrough results. If you're a CIO looking to lead smarter, scale faster, or dive deeper into the value through IT, this episode is your blueprint. Dave, thank you so much for joining today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Despite billions of dollars being spent, many digital transformation efforts fail and underdeliver. Do you have any insight as to why?
I think the statistic from Accenture or McKinsey is 70% or so of them do. I think going too big, too fast, so trying to take on too much at once, not ensuring that you have the right business buy-in and the SMEs truly engaged in the effort. We often go to this part-time job sort of thing. You can help out on the side, and that works very poorly. And you have to try out ideas and be willing to have some of them fail. Again, back to going too big. If you go big, then there's certainly a lot of pressure not to fail. If we go small and we try ideas and we pilot and do proof of concepts, then we have an opportunity to find things that don't work well and leave them and focus in other areas. In my experience, those are the primary reasons why. It tends always with technology, it's usually not the technology that's the issue, it's the people. So change management and having the people come along on the journey is always critical.
Thank you for that. I believe one of the biggest misconceptions around digital transformation is it has to be big and it has to have a significant impact in iteration one. Do you believe that's a common misconception, or do you believe there's any other misconceptions that people have?
Unfortunately, you hit the reality very squarely. When I engage with executives, say in the last 2 months, I want AI everywhere. Okay, that's a pretty big, broad mandate that we could spend probably a month trying to define. So yes, absolutely. People tend to go too big and wanting to disrupt a lot of things, which gets back to the people and the change management. How am I going to manage all this change assaulting you all at once? Look at the disruptive technologies, look at how you want to pilot them, find the use cases where you think you will deliver value and not dilute the effort. I think that's another failing of overall on IT strategy, is that a good strategy covers 3 main pillars. What do I need to do to maintain day-to-day operations? What can I do to do continuous improvement? And then the area where digital transformation would fit, what are those disruptive technologies and such? And we tend to overemphasize the third. And that, yes, that is a recipe for problems.
So companies are investing into platforms that they are now letting spread enterprise-wide when we look at systems like Salesforce or SAP. Salesforce specifically, how do you believe this relates to overly complex platforms, where they might have started off with a very specific use case, but over time it's become so complex? How do companies circle that square of getting it back to the fundamentals?
That is a difficult one, and we often feel we're smarter than the implementation services and such, and the best practice model evolves over time. The vendors continue to add new functionality. So that brings up one of our 4-letter words of governance and ensuring, especially at the enterprise level, that I have the right business leaders engaged and talking about managing these applications as a corporate asset. and managing how we want to spend the resources, how do we want to support the applications, grow them, or procure other solutions. It requires a bit of hands-on involvement because left unfettered, the scope creeps, the customizations start racking and configuration changes start racking up, and you wind up being in a situation makes it difficult to upgrade, difficult to support. And are you really getting the business value for the investment that you made? Yes.
You brought up an interesting point, and going back to Salesforce, I feel like companies start off leveraging it and using it like a tool. It was easy to stand up, it was easy to build, and over time, I feel like the mindset for some of the larger businesses have not shifted to being a true enterprise platform. And so they will work with consultants to come in, and sometimes they'll do what I call transformation theater. They will enact a number of changes that look really good, but it doesn't really drive to real change. Do you feel like this is something that is systemic inside of the world that you live in, or is it something that is more of an individual use case where real change is actually taking place?
It's certainly a danger, and we've all experienced great sales call and lots of possibilities that we're going to unlock. And then the reality is we spent a lot of time and money and didn't get much for our efforts. And that is a challenge that has to be managed. I think more preparation up front of what is the problem or problems I'm trying to solve. What would good look like if we were able to solve those? And then is doing that in your example in Salesforce the best way to approach that, or are there other ways? And I think also looking at, is my business process just poorly managed to begin with, and should I just start over? And that should be the transformation, not trying to stay in that pillar 2 of incremental improvement.
I found way too often there might be an idea on how something is supposed to be done, or there might have been documentation from 15 iterations ago, but having something that is live and then being able to base an opinion off of fact versus opinion of how someone feels, I think is also one of the major challenges when looking at systems like ServiceNow, Salesforce, SAP. If you don't have your grounding in place of what you're looking at, it can turn into a much bloated conversation where the perception may be we need to start again. And I feel that with there being so many consulting services that are coming in saying they did it wrong, we need to start again, or they were the one who messed this up, it doesn't actually get to the core of it may not be a complete reset, but it may be an iteration or changing the business process to map to the best practices versus simply lifting and shifting old ways of doing business. In your experience, how have you had that discussion with whether an internal team or with people you've worked with of the new way of doing business is actually more effective than simply lifting and shifting the way you've always done your work?
You packed a lot into those statements, Mike. So on day 1 of a system go live, everything looks good. We have process maps, we did training of all the users, we're excited, and things tend to go well. Then everything deviates from there. People change, people take on new roles, we hire new folks, we make changes to the process. What you describe is often the case where my documentation doesn't actually match with what I'm doing. And understanding how we should be using the system, is it incremental improvement or is it starting all over? And that gets into spending resources up front to ensure that the users understand what the process is, they've been properly trained, the documentation lines up. And that can be a tough sell, as in, no, let's just fix it, bite the bullet right now and re-implement it. But the proper planning pays off well. Understanding not only how are we supposed to be using the system, but then documenting how we want it to work in the future. And of course, circling back to my earlier comment about, did we set the people up to be successful? Did we give them the right training? Is the data quality correct? That often is another problem with processes, is the data quality creeps negatively over time. So there can be many reasons why I'm not getting the value that I expect out of it. And I think doing the investigation and spending the time to review that is money well spent.
It reminds me of a story many years ago, worked with an Ivy League school in New York, and they wanted to recreate their alumni initiative inside of Salesforce. And they wanted to simply lift and shift their homegrown system into the platform. And they were convinced that they had the best solution and they just needed a new interface. And so it took a number of conversations, and finally we had to come to the table and say, we will build out yours as we'll plan and build yours out as a POC as option A. And option B is we're going to leverage out of the box standard functionality, and we're going to show you the difference between the two. Theirs had 35 steps in the things that they wanted done, and out of the box got it down to 5 because it was focusing more on the outcome and the quicker way to do it. Do you feel we're finally at a point where there might be openness to completely redoing how business is done in order to accomplish an outcome using a different approach?
I think in any situation, you have people that are very supportive of the change, people are neutral, and then people who are often physically getting in the way of the change. Like the situation you described, this is how we've done it. It's worked. I understand how it works. That situation happens a lot. It's part of the change management aspects of how am I going to deal with those key individuals and get them on board, either just by directing that this is happening and you can help or you can be impacted by it, or as you were describing, some more of a coercive approach of explaining here's the benefits not only to you but to the organization, to the people downstream in the process from you. So that's another example of things I think up front you need to spend time on, because you often get to the implementation and we're live, and now you see where these key individuals are gumming up the works and they're not fully on board, and it's better to deal with that in advance and be able to tap into their knowledge and expertise to help the implementation go smoother. I think that happens in almost every project.
What do you believe makes an AI native platform so attractive? And is it really a disruptor, or is it just the next shiny thing?
I've seen some different iterations of that. Where am I just interacting with the agentic AI? And so my interface is now that versus some sort of web page. And others that think are not saying AI is at the core, but they're overall looking at it in a completely different way than the legacy system would implement it. So while you think of a relational database and we have objects and the center is which object is the center of the implementation, and they're looking at it as maybe it's not that one, or maybe it's a combination of ones. So you see that like with ITSM is, so ServiceNow has acquired MoveWorks, they're adding the agentic AI, they're adding a different way to interact with their existing system, but the system itself is still structured the other way. Some of the new startups are, yes, the center is an agentic AI, and they're looking at it in a different way. The object of a IT ticket isn't the center of the universe. It's more the knowledge and bringing the knowledge together so people can solve their own problems. So I'm not even engaging with a help desk agent, just the AI is solving the problem. So I think it's a combination of things, and that gets into what is your willingness to engage with a new technology that may not be perfect and help a vendor grow, wanting to stay with the established solution and work with them, enhancing their own functionality. And I think that's often more of a personality or cultural challenge.
In your opinion, if a CIO is tasked with the mandate from leadership and from the board to go and implement AI, do you think it's advisable for them to look at it from a ground up, meaning a replacement for specific use cases and for almost like a Lego block of fixing different components of the problem? Or do you think a CIO should look at it from more of the structural and enterprise level of the main platforms they have, are they designed and built in such a way that they can leverage AI as part of the core platform? For example, ServiceNow has some agentic capabilities. Salesforce has some agentic capabilities, and requires a significant amount of time and investment to really fully leverage and to make those come to life. Versus if you were to implement AI on the bottom tier and fix a little specific use case, you can get a very quick return. How do you think a CIO should approach it if their mandate is such?
I do think you need an overall strategy, and that is quite challenging, as what we thought about AI a year ago versus today is evolved quite a lot. We have this situation you just described. Every enterprise application is going to have an agentic AI. Which one do I interact with? Do I need to interact with multiples? I hope not. I look at it from the end user perspective is I should just have one I don't know, portal to get help. And I don't really need to understand how it all works. And so I think CIOs and the executive technology leaders need to be thinking, how do I foresee at this moment in time that laying out? But the business needs AI can deliver value today, as you were describing with certain use cases, and I wouldn't want to shy away with that. So back to my earlier disruptive comments, I think we should identify a small handful of use cases that we pursue vigorously and implement that functionality. The biggest challenge I've seen with AI is, Mike, I can show you a use case and say, here's how you could use, say, ChatGPT to perform a particular task. Me describing it, me giving you a document telling you how to do it, in my experience, is not getting it done. That you still suffer frustration, you suffer a lack of confidence in the solution. So we move towards doing videos and creating training documentation that way, where we're showing you someone actually performing the task using AI. And I think there's much more hands-on to bring people along with this technology than I've seen in the past with others. I've had very intelligent people sit through multiple sessions with Microsoft on how to use Copilot, and then they try to use it for about 10 to 15 minutes and walk away in frustration that this is making things more difficult for me. So that has to be part of your overall AI strategy. Also is, who's the user population? How are we going to bring them along? Does everyone need this? Is everybody going to get the value? Because it is expensive. I'm guarantee there are very powerful use cases you should pursue, but at the same time, you need to be addressing the overall strategic questions and bringing them up to the executive leadership and the board, and understanding how much investment do we want around this? How much do we want to change our SAP or Salesforce, our Workday, and our enterprise systems? Do we want to invest and build our own agentic AI to pull it all together when the vendor landscape in a year will probably be quite different? And I'm sure all the vendors are going to be competing to be in that lead agent role. So
you think a year? I'm thinking like 2 weeks. The landscape's going to change.
Yeah. Yes, they're all rushing in that direction very quickly. Yes.
A few years ago, we, within the IT environment, were faced with a situation where if an employee wanted to have a mobile device, it was issued to them by the company, typically. And then it moved to a world where a lot of employees were saying, my personal device is better, so I'm going to have 2 devices. And companies finally started to embrace that, so long as they have trust in their employee, that an employee should be able to bring their own device to work. And then you had solutions like MDM to help control some of the information on those devices. But it became more of a partnership where whatever the device the end user wanted to use, so long as they were doing their job, it really didn't matter to the business. Do you feel that the same approach is going to finally be adopted by organizations, that instead of mandating what AI platforms and tools can be used, that it will be open up to say, be creative, use the tools that you find and share those results with the business, because we might all benefit from it? Or do you feel that there's still a need and want for control of, here's what's approved, here's what's been vetted from an architecture review board, don't color outside these lines? Where do you think things are going?
Yeah, so that's been for at least 5-6 years, the juggling act of IT leadership of what do we allow the business or quote, shadow IT to go and do versus we want to centralize it. The challenge with AI is it's very good at finding data and using data, and whatever it has access to, it will look at. So as you see with examples like Disney, where they roll out Copilot and they didn't really restrict it, they found out how you could ask it seemingly innocent questions and it would give you an answer like, what is the CEO's pay package? Can you show me that? And it pulls up the document. And so my main concern with AI is related to intellectual property protection, data privacy. And if you go out and buy licenses to an AI solution, where is that data going? What does it have access to? And I think for now that needs to be centralized till the security and the authentication tools catch up to what AI is capable of. It's the same problem with the agent, is the agent can do all sorts of things if you give it permissions, but you have to pause and think, do I want to allow it to create user accounts and give them system admin privileges? In the wrong hands, my troubles get amplified very quickly. So I think for now, I'm an advocate that it needs to be centrally controlled. And I also don't think it's a tool for about a third of the knowledge workers. That's part of what we're trying to do at Quadris, is where can we apply AI out on the manufacturing floor and how can we enable those workers to take advantage of it. But in general, the tools as we're used to interacting with are more applicable to the knowledge worker and wanting to ensure that we have them in place in a way that protects the corporations and the corporation's assets.
I believe that was the vision of what Microsoft 365 or Copilot was doing originally, which is leveraging the SharePoint structure or the Azure environment that said, if you have access to these folders, then you should be able to train on it for your own personal use. And it was following that same mandate. I don't know if it's actually been rolled out successfully to provide that level of awareness, but I know that ChatGPT recently, in one of their announcements this week, is they've now given the ability to connect to, I believe it was Box, Google Drive, and a few other platforms, that if you've got control and you've got structure around what information is sitting in there, you could expose and say, I want you to only access this folder, for example, and you can train and ground the knowledge base on that specific use case. I feel might be blending the solution a little bit where you still have that overall control, but you're letting the end user almost choose their flavor of how they want to access that information. Do you think that might be a solution that could scale, or do you think that we're still not there as far as figuring it out?
That's certainly where OpenAI is trying to go, is to build a solution that allows you to work with your existing structures and permissions. So I think that's certainly where the trend is, and that helps for the here and now. The challenge with AI is I can ask it questions, and depending on how I ask the question, I can get different answers, and understanding what data is it using to answer my question, understanding like, does it feel empowered to make an educated guess off the data that you provided? So it's easy to find examples on LinkedIn where I asked it for a statistic about XYZ and it gave me one. And then I asked it where it got it from and it said it made it up. And I think it's more it inferred it and just rolled the dice. But that's one of the challenges with AI, is that I can't, poorly implemented, I don't think it's a high confidence solution, but properly implemented, I think it's very rock solid. So again, another sort of reason why I think more centralized control and more centralized almost oversight from skilled persons to help you use the tools. So I'm not directly providing prompts and such. I'm asking it questions in a conversational way, and it's interpreting how to do the prompt engineering and such. And I think for the majority of people, that will be a much more successful path than trying to interact with it directly.
So let's pivot a little bit. I would like your opinion and your thoughts on the changing nature of consulting. So the old model used to be PowerPoints, and I believe the new model is moving to more long-term retainers or more outcomes focused. What role do you believe that consultants are going to play in this new world of AI and things changing so quickly? Do you think they're now irrelevant? Do you think they have more importance? What is your take?
I think for the quote big five consulting firms, their business model is changing rapidly. The appetite for a large engagement waned quite a bit. And I think the move is more towards these fractional roles. I'm going to bring in a part-time resource to help me, and someone who has experience in this area or understands that functional area. So that is definitely the trend. So the idea of I'm going to bring in 20 consultants and 3 of them are more experienced and a lot of them are just learning by doing, that's
So would you say that the consultants may be moving to more of an embedded operator model?
operator, and in some cases, manager of a team with a specific purpose or objective.
And I feel also that the desire is to have more outside of the box creative thinking versus just regurgitating whether it's past decks or what you learned at an MBA, because you can train a lot of these agents. If you ground an agent in a certain prompt, you can actually get some really good results that typically management consultants would have delivered.
I think everyone can be an expert. And if you know how to use the tools and it's set to the right data sources, you could mimic a high level management consultant. I think that's part of the challenge they'll have around their business model. That also gets into using these use cases that you brought up and spending some effort to work them out, where now maybe I don't need to bring a specialist in to manage this. I can do through a model I've created.
So from your perspective, where do you believe the biggest opportunities are from your point of view?
In my personal experience, a properly launched model brings up answers that don't make sense to the expert. And when you investigate that and you understand why the model thinks that's the right answer, you learn a lot of things that you're often blind to. So I think the opportunity for driving efficiency and driving costs down by using the models and really understand what's going on, because it can consume so much data and analyze so much that it would take us decades to do, and do so in a matter of minutes. I think that is the real power of this. And I'm in life sciences, so I look at how can I help people who have unmet medical need, as in there isn't a treatment. So how can I use these tools to help move the treatments through the clinical approval process quicker? You saw the FDA came out, was it last week, with a statement, we're embracing AI to review new drug applications because it takes too long. I think in this case, the government is actually ahead of industry, that industry is more risk averse than apparently the new people in charge. And maybe that's going to be great, because why can't we ensure the same level of safety, but why can't we move quicker? Why can't we use these tools to review these reams of paper that get submitted?
You brought up an interesting point, which was if the results are different from what you have expected as a seasoned expert, you may go back and see the chain of thought and see the analysis that was done to get to that outcome. I feel like you need to have the experience to recognize the difference before you can do that analysis. So for someone that's been doing the role for a few years or who has deep understanding, I think it's easy to pick up that's not right, or how did you go into it, and you can retrain or reframe your way of looking at things. For someone who's maybe more junior that doesn't have any exposure to the depth of knowledge gained through experience and sometimes through painful experience, how can they check and validate that what's being presented to them is actually truth?
Yeah, to me, that shows up as the calculator problem. So back when I was in school, oh, we don't want to give kids calculators because they'll never learn how to do math. And yet now we've progressed way beyond calculators. The experienced person, as you said, will notice this. I think there's still learning opportunities for more junior individuals to understand how is the model working, how did it analyze this thing, and learn from that experience. And I think you can do so in a safer environment where we're not investing months and hundreds of thousands of dollars to do the experiment. We're using the model to do it more virtually. So I'm willing to I think the junior folks are willing to take more risks and try more. So I think the learning opportunities may actually be increased by this. But I wouldn't let AI just run on its own. At some point, you need some sort of human interaction or human verification that, yes, this is what I want to do.
So it sounds like you're encouraging one to lead with curiosity and not conformity, and to think differently, but also testing out how things are done.
Yeah, that's a very good way to say it. One, again, with the change management, if you believe, as someone told me this morning, these AI models hallucinate a lot. If that's your stance, then you're going to have a very difficult time embracing the technology, because you're always going to be skeptical of anything it says. If you are embracing it as in, we spent time to build this model and it's based upon our expertise, and if it tells me something, then I should be curious as to why it said that. Then I think the value add is much, much higher.
I think AI can be used to really amplify decisions and not necessarily automate away responsibility. And I think it's going to take a significant shift in expectations that it's a collaboration between the technology and the humanness, versus saying AI is going to take over. And there's a lot of areas that it will replace day-to-day functions that people are currently doing. But I think if applied right, it can actually open up so many more opportunities.
I absolutely believe it will open up many doors much quicker than we would ever have on our normal progress of gaining knowledge. And that we should embrace it and find those use cases that are out there and start using it. And that's how you're going to build overall confidence. If I'm just playing around with ChatGPT online, then yeah, I'm not necessarily getting a very positive impression of the technology. But if I'm using it for something that I already understand and see the value, then yeah, that's the opportunity. And as I was talking about with the drug approval process and all, my thoughts are big in ways to impact society in a very positive way. How can I get drugs quicker? How can I increase the drug yield so I'm making twice as much drug for the same amount of money? What we talk about drug prices all the time. Can I split the difference and I'll take 20% more profit and cut the price with the remainder? I think there are a lot of opportunities to just look at things very differently. But and the other problem I see with it is somehow humans have become perfect in this discussion. So if I use AI to transcribe data, I'm very concerned like it made a mistake. But if I have you, Mike, transcribe the data, it's expected you're not going to be perfect. I give you a stack of 100 papers and say, can you type these in? We're going to assume you have a certain error rate because you're human. But now if we do it in AI and it's 99% accurate, oh, it didn't hit 100. I think our standards are a little out of whack, that we expect it to be much more perfect than we are.
Absolutely. So I've got 5 questions for you. I just want a quick response. It's just off the cuff. So let's see what you think. What do you believe is the most overhyped buzzword in the enterprise space?
Digital transformation.
Okay, that's a good one.
It comes up in every conversation.
What's one AI tool that you're excited about?
The Google, is it Notebook LM is every week somebody shows me something neat you can do with it that I had just not thought of. Yesterday or the day before, somebody said, oh, I download my calendar into it and it organizes my schedule and tells me how I should run my day.
What is one system or process that desperately needs rethinking?
Oh, within the corporation, I think this gets into, you see a lot of AI enabled RPA, so workflow, where the AI can go into that shared mailbox, it can read the attachment, it can transcribe all the data into your ERP system or into your Salesforce, and all I need to do is just verify it. The potential to just remove all that human error and have the machine do it for something I probably don't enjoy doing very much.
What is one thing that CIOs should stop doing right now?
We're not doing right now. The main one that comes up is we tend to use the acronyms and talk about the technology, and we're here for the business. And we need to continue to emphasize how are we helping the business and how are we helping the revenue generation work smarter, faster, better.
Okay. And what is your bold prediction for enterprise software in the next 12 months?
The next 12 months, I think this convergence, because you have several of the very large vendors that their solution does everything. With the addition of AI, I think you're going to become removed enough from the application that you're really not going to care what the application is.
Dave, this has been a powerful conversation about breaking the status quo, questioning legacy thinking, and using tools like Salesforce and AI to truly drive business change.
Well, sure. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me there, and I'd be glad to chat further with anyone who's interested in a little one-on-one.
And any final messages for CIOs rethinking their platform strategy or digital transformation?
As we were discussing earlier, you need an AI strategy that needs to include how and what why around agentic AI, and how am I going to use that to help the business, to propel the business forward? Because my interactions with the business leaders is they're not that forward thinking. They're not thinking about how we can just blow things up and do it completely different. That's what the CIOs and our us technology leaders need to bring to the table.
Dave, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate having you on as a guest, and I look forward to staying in touch.
No, thank you, Mike. Much enjoyed it too. All right.
That was great. Thank you. You offered some wonderful insights, and I'm really looking forward to where the world is going. And I think the humanness that you added to it, that you need to bring the humans back into the equation, and you can't expect AI to be perfect, is such a critical piece of a conversation that's not really happening.
Yeah, that you can't expect it to be perfect, but the world's not perfect and we're not perfect. And again, conversation I had earlier today, and somebody's talking about the Tesla accident where the Tesla ran over somebody in Arizona. And they're like, that's the one fatality due to self-driving cars. How many thousands have occurred in the meantime with people behind the wheel? And we were talking about that with digital transformation. Did you just set up people to fail and then you're there like the process doesn't work? And that's when you got to set up people to be successful, and thinking of it that way. How we view risk and trying to quantify risk, I think this is another area where that shows up. Like cybersecurity is one where, how risky is this and how much insurance do I want to put in place against that? Versus how AI is the same thing. How bad is it, or how confident are you in the answers, and is that good enough?
I have a personal question. I'd love your thoughts on this. Just as someone who's been maybe around the block a few times, I've been focusing the last 20 years, focusing more on the management consulting, and a lot of it has been in Salesforce, whether it's through IBM or that world. It's just the lens through which I've been seeing the world. Do you think it's still a good place to focus and to kind of niche into, or do you think there's other places in the world of AI and what I call mid-market and early enterprise where they're facing those challenges of what to do next? That would be a better place to focus based on your experience.
I think the whole ecosystem, everybody has to have AI somehow in their plans. And as you were bringing up in your questions, so the startups are taking a different approach. I don't do a lot around CRM. Pretty much every commercial team I work with uses Salesforce. They want Salesforce. Don't say Dynamics. That's a 4-letter word. And sit there. That's not going to go away. That I just think it's a very lumbering kind of beast. It's here and it's here to stay. So I'm not sure that changes, but I think again the model is moving towards I need help for 10 hours a week for the next 6 months, and versus I'm going to hire you full time for 6 months, or I'm going to go hire one of the implementation services company and they'll bring in a team. Even at the strategic level, I'm willing to spend money to hire a piece of your day to have you help guide me on how we should do this, to bring, here's what other people have been doing with in this example with Salesforce, that seems to be amping up quite a bit. And as I talk to executives and companies, with all the craziness in the world, can I rent what I need for right now and then decide, do I want that a full-time role, yes or no?
Yeah, and that's what I'm seeing as well. And I think there's a lot of companies that have bought into Salesforce and they can't turn it off because there's no realistic alternative. But they've got to a point in their implementation where they're at a tipping point, or I would call crossing the chasm moment, where the implementation that they have built has got them to where they are. But in order for them to cross into that next phase, whether it's hyper growth or taking advantage of AI, they have really a valley of despair in front of them because they don't have the foundations in place to fix it. And the technical debt they have incurred so far is leaving them in a very vulnerable position. But I find a lot of those companies don't have the objective third-party opinion of what to do. You know, the consulting firms are coming in saying, we need to rip and replace, or you need to hire a team of 20 people and we're going to rebuild it, or we're going to augment your team. Do you think that there's a third place, as you said, that fractional? Do you think that's a better approach?
That's certainly in my conversations, but I think with the tool set, many executives are looking at what's Salesforce's AI strategy and how are we going to use that. And then they've been pushing the, what do they call that? Sales agent, I think is their
Agent Force.
Yeah, Agent Force. I look at it as in marketing and sales. Those are great use cases for AI. And why do I need to rely on what Salesforce is doing? Why can't I look at doing my own thing or leveraging other AI tools? And the data can be a mess, but I got the data and it's digital and AI can sort it out. When you train a model, the first few iterations are pretty poor, but as I work with it, it gets smarter and it starts sifting through, this data is trash and I'm going to ignore it, and this data is good, I'm going to overemphasize it, and the results become stronger and stronger. That, I think, is being grossly underserved. So when I talk to a CEO and they're like, I need AI everywhere, and that's a real comment, I think she's looking at like, why can't we exploit this for commercial product? And how could we do that? And I think there are numerous opportunities, both using AI on your own data, but also looking at the market. So again, in life sciences, I have a drug to treat Parkinson's, say, and Parkinson's has certain symptoms, but Parkinson's also can take 2 to up to 6 years to be diagnosed. So I could not know I have it. There's a lot of publicly available anonymized health data, and look for these people and look for who's the medical professional treating them, and then go to the medical professional and say, I saw you have 5 patients that appear to have these kinds of symptoms. Have you thought about this or that? Those are opportunities you would never have been really able to do without AI. And that's not working with Salesforce data, that's working with publicly available sources. So I think it's not just the fractional, but it's also looking at it beyond the enterprise application.
Very much. And I think once you have a understanding of your environment, your truth, whatever that landscape looks like, you can start to see where those, whether it's a startup or a specific use case, can be addressed by AI. But I feel that there's so many people that don't have clarity and awareness of a roadmap of their current environment to even have those discussions.
I like the DRIP acronym: data rich, information poor. And I would say we usually don't even know what data we have, let alone like SharePoint and OneDrive and Google Drive. Like, if people just throw out stuff out there for years and then if you have no idea. So another use case I see for AI is, can you catalog the data I have and such? We talked about that with business process. So understanding what I have today is important. I think most organizations don't. It sounds super IT-ish. Oh, we're going to create a data catalog. What the heck's that going to do for me? And it's difficult to explain. But if I'm talking about, I'm going to generate a sales lead AI solution, and as part of that, I need to catalog what data do I have around customers, potential customers. That's the same sort of challenge in our digital transformation of how do I get started? How do I provide enough business value along the way to keep people interested? Yet I need to know where my goal is and the path I'm going to travel. Roadmaps aren't very exciting, and roadmaps are difficult to get the business in. Everybody wants an IT strategy. Everybody wants a technology strategy. But when you want to have the conversation of what do I want ERP to do, it's not exciting. People tune you out quickly. And that's back to it. So then Accenture will come in, we'll do 3 months of workshops. Often I need to spend the time up front to understand how am I working today and where are the real problems and so forth.
So since you have a background in the medical industry, I've got an analogy that I've been working on with clients, and I would love your feedback if this is something that makes sense or if I'm confusing the words here. And so I've been sharing with clients that approaching Salesforce the way a medical doctor approaches a patient. So diagnosing before prescribing. And saying too often companies focus on implementation or rework without truly understanding what's wrong. Approach is different, strategic, and proven. So step one is understanding the vitals. So the foundational elements of an environment. Org analysis, dependencies, automating documentation, assessing impact zones, and understanding process-driven design gives you a clear snapshot of what's working, what's not. Second step is a deep diagnosis. So think of this as an X-ray or an MRI. So based on what the vitals are telling us, digging deeper to the root causes, meaning it could mean identifying architectural bottlenecks, security vulnerabilities, governance gaps, misalignment between sales capability and business process, and then the treatment plan. So this is more of that ongoing roadmap for health and success. It's not about fixing the issue today, but building sustainable solutions, including architectural modernization, consolidation of org, data strategy, AI readiness, and establishing governance or COEs to scale.
It does. A few comments come to mind.
Sure.
So to me, it's an iterative process that I'm going to analyze, deep dive, and then treat. But then the treat, it also has to have an overarching or your roadmap or your strategy to it. The other problem that comes up with, you said, I'm going to diagnose, is I need to be able to do that within the time frame that I can react. Telling me 2 weeks after the fact that I have excess inventory doesn't help because the problem is here. Like I can't do anything about it. If you tell me today, if you don't cancel these orders, you're going to have excess inventory in 2 weeks. Now I can do something about it. So having it time frame bound or describing it as in we want to be, and that may be part of the iterative process that I can't first few iterations, but now I've improved enough that now I can treat it within an actionable time frame. That's part of the whole goal of data analytics is data-driven decision making, and it has to be within the time frame that I can take action. I have numerous examples where we started with the same Excel sheet and then we show up at the meeting and we've all created our nice presentations that come to very different conclusions, but we started from the same place. So we spend the meeting deciding whose PowerPoint we're going to look at, and then we have to reconvene in a few days because we ran out of time, and then by then it's like the problem got solved somehow and we're on to the next thing. So I'm a big fan of interactive dashboards, but my interactions with executives are yeah, I've heard about that, and they're just very skeptical that you can obtain that. But yeah, being in operations, so KPIs, what your diagnosis is, what, for human, blood pressure, respiratory, etc., and identifying those and being able to track them is critical. But there's the how do we make things better, but then there's also in your analogy, what's the cure? Is that an upgrade? Is that a real implementation? Is it looking at other solutions? Is it adding third-party solutions, like what I was describing with customer data or external data to drive your customers? I think that works, and people would be able.
I want to tie it more to what a doctor does of they take your blood pressure, they take your blood draw, they do all the basics, and then all maps back to a clarity of understanding of today. in order to influence tomorrow. Or if you come in saying, I need a knee replacement, if I find out that you've got blood clots and you've got other circumstances that are much more significant that could actually hurt your overall health, the knee comes second. And it's trying to provide some, whether it's turning on the lights or just having a frank conversation of there is no right or there is no wrong. This is just what is. And together we can make a decision on what needs to be done. I just feel fundamentally the consulting industry is broken, and trying to find what is the smarter way to approach and actually fixing a real problem versus just coming in and consuming hours, which I don't think works.
Yeah, my interactions with many consulting firms are mediocre. Now, we bring in 10 junior people and you're essentially paying to train them, and they're learning by doing, and that's not adding a lot of value to myself.
Absolutely.
And the partner who's been there, done that, flies in for dinner every couple of weeks. And yeah, so I'm a bit jaded on the implementation partners too, because they come in, everybody's got a best practice model. But I think more time up front around understanding what do we want to get out of the program, the system, in business terms, and getting the business leaders signed up for this. We look, oh, we're going to do ERP upgrade. That's an IT thing. And not thinking about judging the success and failure of the upgrade based on business KPIs, not on is the software still running. And I was closing the monthly books in 5 days. Am I still doing it in 5 days, or did I achieve my goal of 4? Things of that. And so now the CFO says, oh, I want it to be 4. Well, now the finance team is going to be really interested in the upgrade, and how are we going to cut 20% of the time off? Like, he or she thinks we're going to do this. Okay, how do we get them committed to the project? I think it continues to be one of the biggest challenges for the senior technology leaders. Why are we doing this? How does it fit into our business strategy? Do I even have a business strategy that I can align my technology roadmap to? Do you have an idea of what capabilities you need to have? I've had those conversations too.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. And especially if people are asking for things to be done, is what are we trying to achieve? How is this going to have an impact, and who's going to benefit? And then getting the buy-in up front, because halfway through it may change as far as how you're doing it, because a better solution or a better approach might present itself. But if you have a clear outcome, you can pivot very quickly because you're not focused on the tactical. You're focused on whatever it's going to take to get us to that end result in the quickest possible way.
That's why Agile became, you can't do these what I call 90s IT projects. So give me a couple $1 million in 18 months and I'll see you in a year and a half. And you go off into some set of in my experience, trailers, and you build this nice solution. You go, wow, this thing's wonderful. And everything else has changed. And then they're like, oh, now we got to iterate. And just as we were talking about with the digital transformation of having some key things I can deliver quickly, but having where do I want to eventually wind up and how does this all fit together? No one stops and builds a data warehouse now. It's always I'm building it as I'm delivering capabilities and value with very specific business outcomes attached to it.
Absolutely. Dave, this has been incredibly insightful.